Okay, so let me now formally welcome everyone to this webinar. As you can see from the opening video, this is a webinar we're doing with GUAC, the Give Us a Chance Consortium, which is a consortium of social landlords and housing associations. And Lindsay Bouler, who is from GUAC, is going to tell you a bit about that in a minute. And then we have Nina Zuendorf, who is going to talk to us later on about life chances, but I'll tell you all about that after we've done the first bit about GUAC itself. The webinar will last for about an hour, presentation of about 20 minutes, and then while the presentation takes place, if you'd like to type in any questions, any comments in the right-hand chat box, please do, and then we'll take them up when Nina's finished her presentation. Anyhow, as I said, this is one of the many webinars that we're beginning to do with GUAC, and Lindsay is here from GUAC. You can see her here. Lindsay's on the right, Nina's in the center, and I am, for my sins, on the left. Lindsay will tell us a little bit to begin with about GUAC and the consortium and the work it does, in case you don't know. I'm sure a lot of you know already, but for those who don't, it would be great just to have 1 or 2 minutes from Lindsay about GUAC itself. So Lindsay, over to you. You need to put your sound on, Lindsay. I think you've got your sound off.
Schoolgirl error. Hello, morning. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Morning, everyone. I've just been looking in the chat. Who's online? Who said hello? There's some very familiar names and faces there. So I'm really pleased to see lots of GUAC members and also some LEP representatives and other from Nina's links as well. So that's really good. Nice spread of delegates today. I'm only going to spend a minute, really, because I want to give Nina as much time as possible. And I'll be here for the whole webinar and contributing to the chat. But I'll turn my video and sound off after this section. Just a quick thought. The last webinar we had with APM, there was lots of activity in the chat room, loads of connections being shared, email addresses, website links, etc. It was really busy, and it was a great outcome. You know, we got lots of people connected just quickly and informally using that chat room. So I would encourage people to be bold and use that. I've just got some really quick news, I suppose, on what Give Us a Chance has been doing. I think most people have reasonably given us a chance what we do. That 30-second video is out now. It's on our website, and I will send a link in the chat room to that so you can use it. It's a very quick introduction really to the key issues which are at the heart of why GUAC exists and what we're trying to do, which is help tenants and residents of working age into work. So, you know, it's fairly straightforward, but we thought we needed it in a core message. So that's the 30-second video, and I'll get that link to you. This sort of first quarter of this year, I've spent meeting members in their offices and places of work, catching up really on all the amazing work that our members are doing. Really varied, really exciting, and it's working in terms of supporting people back into work. It's really creative, really supportive stuff. And we're using that information just for our own public affairs work and our comms work. So I would say to any GUAC members that haven't yet had me and Jenny, who is our comms lead at GUAC, come and see you, please drop me a line, either in the chat room or directly through my email address. We are really enjoying getting out and meeting members this year. So I wanted to say that. In terms of what's coming up, GUAC are at the Big Lottery Fund next week. We are on the evaluation panel for Building Better Opportunities. So we are learning nationally what's going on with each of those projects and what can be learned across the projects. That involves a number of GUAC members in the delivery of Building Better Opportunities. So I will keep GUAC members posted on what's happening there. We're also meeting next week with the NCDO and IRSA, Employment Related Services Association, for a second meeting on what our plans are post-Brexit for monies like the European Social Fund, which is on average £500 million a year, which has typically been spent on the poorest members of communities in this country. With that going from the Central European pot, we're meeting and planning our positions with various government departments, including the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, on what we want and what we think that money could look like and what it could do after 2020. So that's a really important, interesting, exciting meeting, albeit in difficult times, really, because we're not sure whether that money will be preserved. So that's something for all of us to be thinking about. Lastly, I just wanted to say the monthly webinars are now fixed Friday in every calendar month. We have a special webinar next Friday for GUAC members only, and I just wanted to highlight it. It's Friday, instead of 11, it starts at midday. It's with colleagues from the University of Salford, and it's introducing probably the biggest piece of work we'll do this year, which is summing up the impact of all the work we do and showing it both in social and cashable net terms. So there will be much more information on that and lots of opportunity to get involved at an early stage in that research with GUAC members. So I just wanted to highlight that. So it's this time, it's next week, starting at midday. An email has gone to all members. I'll send it again. So please look out for that. And the regular webinar, we will send more info again, but it will be the last Friday in April. And that will be with one of the directors of the AELP. And that is all about the apprenticeship levy. Because by the end of next month, if you have a pay bill of over 3 million a year, you'll be paying a new tax. Welcome to a new tax. And we're going to explore an update on our members, whether you're paying it or not, how they can get involved. So that's enough from me, and I will now turn off, I will mute myself again and video, and over to Nina. And thank you very much, Nina, for coming on and doing this today.
Okay, so now that Lindsay's muted, we'll carry on with the webinar. Lindsay talked about us doing something on next week on social impact, and that's what this webinar actually is about. It's about social impact. The last webinar we did was about complex lives, the fact that many people in housing associations do lead complex lives, and lots of people are looking at how we can approach the problem of people with complex lives and how we can help them so that they can have healthy and worthwhile lives. And Nina is going to tell us about the Life Chances Fund, which is in fact an attempt to deal with that problem. How do we help people with complex needs, people in early years, young people, people with drug and alcohol dependency, children's services, healthy living, and so on. I mean, that's a wide area, but lots of people do face a lot of complexities in that area. And Life Chances Fund is a fund to help that, but it's not a fund which is a grant. It's a fund which you get paid by results. You've got to have an outcome that you're paid by through processes like social impact bonds. And Nina's going to tell us all about that, what it is, how you apply, who can be involved, and so on. So Nina, thank you for joining us today to do this. And I'm going to hand over to you now to tell us all about the Life Chances Fund and the whole idea of being paid by results. So Nina, over to you. Okay, Nina?
All right. Thanks very much, Francis. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Nina. I work for the Center for Social Impact Bonds at the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And I have been working on the Life Chances Fund, particularly developing Life Chances Fund themes. I've been involved with developing the early years theme, and I'm currently developing the older people services theme, but I'll tell you more about that later. I also advise other government departments and stakeholders, such as local governments, on developing social impact bonds. So this presentation really will be about social impact bonds, what they are, and what the Life Chances Fund is, and how you can apply to it. So first of all, we are going to watch a little video that will explain what social impact bonds are, and we'll take it from there.
I'm David Derbyshire from Action for Children, one of the largest charities in the UK.
I'm Jock Rogers, Strategic Lead Commissioner for Manchester City Council.
And I'm Daria Kuznetsova from Big Society Capital, a UK social investor.
A social impact bond is a new way to finance the delivery of public services, which involves three parties: a commissioner,
A service provider,
And an investor.
right across the country, local and central government commission services that are focused upon tackling a range of social issues. So, a commissioner might pay a charity like us to develop a service that supports young people at risk of entering care or custody.
and while we think it'll work, there's no guarantee specific outcomes will actually be achieved.
A SIB is different. It ensures commissioners only pay for services that deliver.
With the SIB, a commissioner establishes measurable outcomes the project should achieve.
For example, getting a qualification or improved school attendance. A charity or social enterprise develops a service to support a group of people to meet those outcomes.
An investor helps finance the project and enables staff to be hired.
Then, if the outcomes are achieved, the commissioner will then pay the investor back over time.
A SIB ensures commissioners only pay for what works.
Whilst allowing expert organisations to test new approaches and develop early interventions.
Most importantly, the focus on outcomes drives better performance.
And the investor can make both a social and financial return. SIBs are being developed across the UK and internationally.
And are financing programmes tackling some of society's most complex social problems in a completely new way.
Excellent. So fantastic. Okay, so let me go into my presentation. Okay, so I hope everybody can see the presentation on the Life Chances Fund. I will start by talking a little bit more about what social impact bonds are, and then I will go into the specifics about what the Life Chances Fund is and how it can support the development of social impact bonds and how you can apply.
Hi, Nina, your presentation hasn't come up. Would you like to come back on? Stop sharing the screen?
Yes, definitely. Can you see me? Well, my screen's black at the moment, so I can't see anything, but are you still there, Francis?
Hi, Nina, can you stop sharing your screen? Hi, Nina. Do you want to come back on camera? Yeah, your screen didn't work. What I'm going to do is share the screen for you, and you can work from there. Okay? Let's hope it works for me.
That sounds good. Thank you very much.
We'll see.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Francis. I can see the screen now, so I hope others can as well. Right, I'll get started then, if that's all right. Sorry about that. Welcome again to the presentation about social impact bonds and the Life Chances Fund. My name is Nina Zündorf, and I'll quickly walk you through what social impact bonds are again. If you can go to the next, yes, that's perfect. Thank you. So as we have just seen in the introduction video, social impact bonds are a way to deliver public services by making funding conditional on achieving results. So typically we have a government commissioner who agrees to pay for certain outcomes that improves the lives for individuals. So rather than commissioning an entire service, the government commissioner will only focus on commissioning outcomes. So let's take an example. Let's say you have a local authority that would like to prevent children from going into care. Then the outcome would be each child that is prevented from going into care. And this local authority would then commission a service provider. This could be a local charity, for example, to deliver these outcomes. And the service provider might use an intervention such as multisystemic therapy to help those children, to help improve their behavior and to prevent them from going into care. However, the service provider ideally would need some upfront funding to make the project happen. And this is where the social investor comes into play. So social investors provide upfront funding to service providers to set a project up, to get it running, to pay for staff recruitment, etc. And as soon as the project delivers outcomes, the local commissioner, so in this case, our local authority, would issue outcome payments. So let's say a child is prevented from going into care for 6 months. The local authority would say, great, thank you very much. One outcome is achieved. We'll issue the outcome payments, and the outcome payment can then be used to pay back the social investor. So what's interesting here for the government commissioner, which by the way could also be a school, a local police commissioner, a CCG, it could also be a central government department. The government commissioner really only has to pay if an outcome is successful. So the risk, the financial risk of the project is basically with the social investor. If outcomes don't get achieved, the social investors do not get that return on investment, essentially. The other thing that's interesting for government commissioners is that social impact bonds help to deliver public services in a different way and improve the delivery of public services. So because the focus is on delivering outcomes and achieving results for individuals, a good performance framework needs to be put into place in order to measure those outcomes, which helps improve and drive the performance at local authorities or other local commissioners.
Thanks for calling. Ta-ra.
Sorry, I just heard some background noise. Right, what's interesting for the service provider is that they get upfront capital to make an interesting project happen. They can get a significant amount of money from the social investor to deliver a new innovative project. And again, the financial risk is not with the service provider either, it's social investor. So why would social investors get involved? Well, they are interested in delivering positive outcomes for these individuals. They're interested in making a positive contribution to society, but they're also interested in getting a return on investment. So oftentimes a social investor would be a socially minded bank, for example. It could be a philanthropic organization or a charitable organization. So they focus on improving outcomes for individuals, but with the outcome payments, with the return on their investment, they can reinvest that money into other social projects. So that's what's interesting to them in social impact bonds. Francis, if we could go to the next slide. Fantastic, thank you very much. So what role does the Life Chances Fund play in all of this? The Life Chances Fund has been set up in the summer of 2016 with the aim to solve complex social issues, as Francis noted earlier, to help people with complex needs, but also complex social issues that couldn't really be solved by existing services. And the fund is an £80 million fund to provide top-up funding for payment by results contracts or social impact bonds that were locally developed. So what does that mean? So if you have a social impact bond and you are, let's say you are the government commissioner, you are the local authority, then you will have to make outcome payments when outcomes are successful, as I just explained. The Life Chances Fund will contribute to these outcome payments. So the Life Chances Fund contributes normally around 20% of the outcome payments in a social impact bond or a payment by results contract. So let's say your outcome payments are around £1 million. Then we would expect the local commissioner to cover around £800 of the outcome payments, and the Life Chances Fund would match fund, so to say, £200,000 of the outcome payments. I hope that's clear. And the aim of the Life Chances Fund is to support projects that are locally developed. So we would like to support local commissioners, again, local schools, local authorities, CCGs, etc., that work with local service providers to develop such a social impact bond. The Life Chances Fund is structured around 6 key themes. Drug and alcohol dependency and children's services were the first 2 themes. They were launched in the summer. We have already received expressions of interest for these themes and have passed 25 expressions of interest. These applicants are currently developing their full applications and their social impact bonds, so that's underway. Early Years and Young People were the next 2 themes that were launched in January. And the deadline for applications for expressions of interest is actually today. So if you're considering applying, you might be a little bit late for those 2. But never fear, we have 2 more themes that will be launched in the summer. These are Older People Services and Healthy Lives. And I will talk about them in a bit more detail in a second. Next slide, please. So I thought before I go into more detail, it would be good to give you an overview of the process of applying to the Life Chances Fund and the timeline and how it works, basically. So let's say you have an interesting project in mind. You might be a service provider, you might be a charity, you might be a local commissioner or another organization that has an interesting project in mind that will deliver outcomes to help individuals with complex needs. Then you might want to consider applying to the Life Chances Fund. And the first thing you do is once a theme is called out, so for Older People Services and Healthy Lives, the call out will be in June. Once that's called out, you can have a look at our guidance documents to learn a bit more about these themes and what kind of applications we're looking for. And then you can draft your expression of interest. You will submit the expression of interest, and within a month, that's our aim at least, we will get back to you and let you know whether or not you've been successful. If you have been successful, you will then have between 6 and 8 months to develop a full application. So you really have a lot of time to develop this application around a social impact bond. Social impact bonds are quite a new way of delivering services. So we understand that people need some time to come to grips with this. And yes, after you submitted your full application, within 3 months, you will be notified of the decision. What happens in those 3 months? An expert government panel will first review your application and will assess it, and will then make recommendations to the Minister for Civil Society, who makes final decisions on funding, on which proposals the Life Chances Fund will provide funding for. And after you've been notified, hopefully your application was successful, you will then receive a grant offer letter that commits funding for the outcome payments, and you will develop your service and launch your social impact bond. And as soon as outcomes are being achieved, as soon as you can evidence that service providers are achieving the outcomes, you can then submit so-called drawdowns to us that request outcome payments, and we will issue the outcome payments, or at least 20% of the outcome payments. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about our next 2 themes, which are Healthy Lives and Older People Services. The Healthy Lives theme will probably focus on people with long-term health conditions and interventions such as social prescribing. However, please note that we're currently still developing these themes. We're narrowing down what exactly they will focus on, and we will issue and publish a guidance document in June. The same goes for older people services, but this theme will probably focus on older people and diverting them from needing long-term care, so diverting them from care homes, for example, helping accelerate discharge from hospital, etc. But as I said, we're still developing these themes at the moment, and we'll keep you posted on that. The themes will open in June, at the beginning of June 2017, and the deadline for expressions of interest is the 31st of July 2017. We will review the expressions of interest by August, and you will then have until the end of April 2018 to develop a full application. So quite a bit of time to come to grips with what you're doing. Next slide, please. So just to recap really quickly, the Life Chances Fund involves a two-stage application process. You have an expression of interest you will have to submit first, which is quite high level, basically outlining your project proposal, and you will have to submit a full application. Next slide, please. So what does the expression of interest form look at? What kind of information do you need to provide? Well, first of all, it ensures that you're clear about what it is you're applying for, and whether or not you understand what payment by results or social impact bonds are. You will also need to demonstrate that you meet the criteria for applying to the Life Chances Fund. And yeah, that you generally have a sense of what your project is about. That will be good as well. So you'll be asked to provide information on your organization, the project, of course, providing a project summary, what kind of outcomes you would like to focus on. This is quite an important bit, actually, because this is payment by results or outcomes-based commissioning. So you need to clearly define the outcomes and what kind of outcome metrics you would use. Stakeholder engagement plans, as well as including information about commissioners who might be willing to pay for the outcomes. Because remember, the Life Chances Fund will only cover 20% of the outcome payments. You also need to have local commissioners on board who are willing to pay for 80% of the outcome payments. You might apply as a commissioner already, so then you would just have to provide information about yourself. You would also have to tell us whether or not you have previously applied for funding for the same project. We'd like to know about that as well. So next, I will talk about additional funding that you can apply for. If we go to the next slide. So people ask us, so is there any additional funding from the Life Chances Fund for developing the project, and how can we apply for that? So yes, there is additional funding. We call them development grants. So this additional funding is available for applicants who require financial support to further develop their proposal. And it's available specifically for specific pieces of technical advice. So that means in order to develop your social impact bond, you need to ensure you know exactly what kind of outcomes you're looking at, what kind of outcome metrics they are, what are the savings attached to these outcomes is quite important. So technical advice could focus on that. It could focus on developing a financial model, getting a better idea of the savings and the costs you're facing. But technical advice could also be for stakeholder engagement plans or designing new service. So this is the kind of, these are the kinds of things that you could procure with the help of the development grant. We usually look at awarding around 30K per applicant, though this really varies based on the project and your proposal. And of course, we cannot guarantee that any development grants will be awarded. And successful applicants are expected to match fund any funding from the Life Chances Fund. So we do expect you to have some resources yourself to further develop a social impact bond into your proposal. If we go to the next slide. Can we just quickly go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So finally, I thought I'd give you a quick overview of the full application that you would have to develop if you're successful with the expression of interest. So once that development process is over, you will be submitting the full application, and this full application will capture more specific information around your proposal. So whereas the expression of interest was quite high level and really quite basic, the full application really needs to nail down the details and will provide information on the social issue you're trying to address, who your cohort is, what kind of interventions you think you will be using, which outcomes you want to focus on and how you're measuring these outcomes, and also if you have any plans for evaluating your social impact bond or your project. And as I noted earlier, the full application will be reviewed by an expert panel, and this expert panel will make recommendations to the minister, who makes final decisions on which proposals are successful, and hopefully yours will be one of them. Final slide, please. How can you apply to the Life Chances Fund, and who can apply? So as I noted earlier, service providers can apply, commissioners can apply, even intermediaries can apply. So intermediaries would be advisors that help with the development of social impact bonds. So yes, I would recommend, if you have an interesting project in mind, just have a look at the application platform and at the application forms. This platform is available on accesslifechancesfund.service.gov.uk. I've included the link in the presentation slides, and maybe we can share them. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll have another way of sharing this link with you somehow. But if you Google the Life Chances Fund, I promise you somehow you'll end up on this application platform. So this application platform gives you the opportunity to complete an expression of interest form and to complete a development form to apply for development support, which I explained earlier. So just to clarify, you would submit the expression of interest form and the development form together. Soon you will also be able to use this online platform to complete a full application form that's currently still under development, but we're hoping to launch that soon, as well as a way to report ongoing progress with your project if you have been successful in obtaining funding from the Life Chances Fund. So these are the ways you can apply to the Life Chances Fund. If you require further information, I would suggest you send an email to the Big Lottery Fund, who is administering the Life Chances Fund. So we're working very closely with the Big Lottery Fund on this Life Chances Fund, and they are administering the fund for us, and they are doing all the engagement with stakeholders, and they're answering questions about themes, about policies, about the application process. And the email address is lifechancesfund@biglotteryfund.org.uk. I'm sure we'll have a way to share that email address with you somehow as well. There's also the Government Outcomes Lab, which was launched in the summer. We're working very closely in partnership with them as well. They are based at Oxford University at the Blavatnik School of Government, and they also provide advice on social impact bonds and outcomes-based commissioning in general, and it might be worth giving them a ring and asking them for further information as well, because they can provide brilliant advice too. So this was it from me. If we go to the last slide, it just says questions. So I'm really, really looking forward to all your questions now, and I hope I can answer them. And I hope that you will find any relevant information online or by sending an email to the Big Lottery Fund. Thanks very much. Frances, I can't hear you at the moment, unfortunately.
That's because I made Lindsay's childhood error and didn't put my microphone on. We all make those mistakes. My social impact was complete silence. Anyhow, thanks very much, Nina. That was a really comprehensive, description of the process. Lindsay mentioned, whether people can see the slides, and ask if you could send them to her, and they'll put them up on the GUAC website, which would be great if you could do it. Other people have asked, or Lindsay again, if you could type in the link to the Life Chances site, that would be great as well, Nina. We have one person who's just emailed me to say she was having technical difficulties getting on. And I should tell you, for anybody who has had technical difficulties, don't worry. As long as you registered, you will automatically be sent a recording of this. So you will get that, which is great. Okay, so if you would like to put your questions up, and your comments up, then I will put them to Nina and get her to respond to that. We've already where he said, are there any examples where housing providers have participated as either both commissioners and also providers of service? Do you have any knowledge of that, Nina?
Interestingly, I don't have any knowledge of housing providers having participated as commissioners or service providers. So we currently have around 32 social impact bonds that are already up and running. And as far as I know, none of them includes a housing provider. However, one of our aim is to encourage more housing providers to get involved with this because they could be either a commissioner or a service provider. And I think especially for the last Life Chances Fund theme, older people services, when we look at care provision, I think it would be great if housing providers got involved in social impact bonds and in developing proposals.
Okay, I mean that's a good, I think, case for GUAC to help disseminate the information about the Life Chances Fund, and maybe your department as well might do some more work on housing providers, because obviously they're clearly a sector that would really be interested in this, because they work with a tremendous number of people with complex needs. Jenny's asked a question which I was going to ask if there was a shortage of questions, and there won't be, and that is, how do you sort of develop a social impact bond, and how do you find the investors? Where do they come from?
That's a really good question, and we get that question a lot, actually. So I think the first part of your social impact bond is actually quite focused on just outcomes. Forget about that difficult term, social impact bond. Just think about what kind of outcomes you really want to achieve for individuals. And once you know what kind of outcomes you want to deliver, how much as a commissioner would you be willing to pay for the outcome? Or if you're not a commissioner, if you're a service provider, think about how much benefits these outcomes would have for the individual, but also for a commissioner. So I used the example of preventing children from going into care earlier. If you achieve that, you're not only helping these children, you also help local government commissioners save quite a bit of money. So that's where I would start. I would start focusing on the outcomes and how much worth these outcomes are and who would benefit from them. And then once you know which kind of commissioners would benefit from the outcomes, you can then approach them and pitch the idea to them and say, look, we want to develop this project. Are you interested in supporting it? And are you interested in paying for these outcomes? And if yes, how much would you be willing to pay for them? So that's sort of how you get started. With respect to the social investor, usually they are engaged at a later stage. So the first bit is really around who do you want to help, what outcomes do you want to achieve for them, who might be your service provider, etc. And then at a later stage, you can start thinking about, okay, so we need some upfront funding to get this started, right? Who could we get it from? And what's quite interesting to people is that there is quite a lot of social investment out there. We don't lack in social investors. It's actually that we're more lacking in proposals to get those social investors interested. So there are lots of social investors out there who are interested in investing in interesting proposals, and sometimes they have specified in this. So they are charitable trusts, for example, that would like to do social investment. There might be a foundation. There might be a private organization that wants to do more not philanthropic activities, but activities that help make an impact on society. So it's really a range. It's a range of organizations that could qualify as a social investor. And we have a social investor directory actually that we share with people, giving you a long list of potential investors that might want to get involved. Though my initial advice would be, don't worry about the social investor just yet. That part usually comes automatically later on.
Yeah, Jenny was asking if you had a list of social investors, but you've just mentioned that you do have that. James says that there are some examples of housing providers being investors in Liverpool. So housing providers, housing associations can be investors as well as providers as well, can't they? So they could be one of the local development organisations who are putting cash into it, as well as some of them who are taking cash out and developing a project around outcomes.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. So we have to be careful here because social investment and social impact bonds is not directly the same thing. So it could be just the social investment project where housing providers are social investors that invest in housing projects, for example, but that doesn't necessarily need to be a social impact bond. A social impact bond always involves achieving some sort of outcome. And just with bricks and mortar alone, you won't achieve outcomes. So a project that involves housing would need to involve some sort of intervention that achieves outcomes for individuals that are in need of improved outcomes, basically.
Alison's raised the question about sustainability. Are there any examples of where you've had a social impact bond that succeeded, of then the project not coming to an end, but going on to be a regularly commissioned service so that you have long-term sustainability? Because the last thing you want is a project to start, to get this very good, and then to stop because the money runs out.
Absolutely. That's such an important point. And I think, to be completely honest, that's something that wasn't properly thought about in the initial social impact bonds. So as of now, because this is such a new model, we only have 3 social impact bonds that have actually completed. So I know that the London Rough Sleeping social impact bond that was commissioned by the Greater London Authority together with the Department for Communities and Local Government, that one has completed, and they're currently looking at ways to continuing the service exactly for that reason. Excuse me. They have looked at crowdfunding, for example, as a way to further finance the project. So they are just looking at ways to continue it. But I think this is a really important point, and going forward, we need to think more about this. And I know that the Department for Communities and Local Government, they have recently launched an outcomes fund to develop social impact bonds for homeless people. They have made this a requirement in their application process, saying you need to outline ways to sustain the project. You need to show us how you would continue the project after funding from central government is running out. So I unfortunately don't have a perfect answer to this, but I think it's important to bear this in mind.
Well, sustainability is clearly always a problem, and how to keep something going after an initial sort of kickstart is difficult. Incidentally, in GlobalNet, we've done a webinar on crowdfunding, and if anybody wants that, I'll pass it on to Lindsay and Alan, and you can make that available to people, because it's a really interesting webinar about how you do it and how you set it up and the amount of work you've got to put into it, which is quite considerable. So that's worth having. When you talk about outcomes that you're going to measure, Nina, I mean, who decides on those? Is that something that's decided by the commissioner? Is that something that the department has involved in? Or is it a negotiated thing between the provider and the commissioner? They get together and discuss it and come to an agreed list of outcomes.
Okay, so there are two models for this. So there are government outcomes funds like the Life Chances Fund that are more centrally managed, if I can put it that way. So, for example, the Fair Chance Fund or the new Homelessness Outcomes Fund that's been recently launched, that one has set so central government has set the outcomes centrally. They've set the outcomes they will be paying for, and they have set the outcome payments quite clearly. And the reason for that is that in that fund, the central government pays a much higher contribution to the outcome payments. So they say, okay, since we pay this contribution, we will set the outcomes. With the Life Chances Fund, this works a little bit differently. So we would like to give local commissioners the opportunity to set their outcomes themselves. So even though we contribute 20%, we expect local commissioners to sit down and say, okay, what are the outcomes we would like to achieve? So to answer your question, I think the one who pays for the outcomes would have the upper hand in defining the outcomes, if that makes sense, which I think is fair, probably. However, that's not to say that there won't be some sort of negotiation or discussion with service providers on, is this achievable? You know, can you do this? Does this look like the right thing? You have experience in dealing with these cohorts, so please let us know if we're having the right idea. So I think ideally there would be good communication and a good common approach to setting the outcomes and agreeing them. And this is all being done. It's a process, basically, and it's finalized in a contract, in a social impact bond contract between the local authority and the service provider that clearly sets out these outcomes.
Okay. Jenny's asked if you could share the Social Investors Directory, and maybe you can put a link up to that. Lindsay's asked some questions about any events and meetings coming up. Maybe we'll take that at the end, how we can take this further with housing associations. But you mentioned the performance framework, which is the framework in which the outputs are agreed and the whole process develops. What do you mean by a performance framework, Nina?
So that in order to know whether or not an outcome is successful, you need to have a really, really robust framework in place to measure these outcomes. So all I mean by framework is basically outlining the outcomes and how to measure them and how to provide evidence that these outcomes are achieved. And this is something that I think, to be quite honest, a lot of commissioners struggle with initially. Because databases might not be up to date, information gathering might not be something that organizations are used to. So initially, I think a lot of commissioners and also service providers struggle with this bit to setting up a performance framework that measures whether or not outcomes have been successful. Even though this is something that they struggle with, I think it's a chance for organizations because it helps them understand actually whether what they're doing is working or not. So in the end, it helps to achieve better value for money, which I think in these difficult budget times is quite important for everybody. So yeah, that's I think it's an important part of the social impact bond.
Okay. If you want to keep putting your points and questions, please do. But I'm going to ask you a rather difficult question now, Nina, and okay. That is, you don't mind. I mean, when you have a performance-based system, you're measuring intended consequences. And the trouble is that when you're dealing with complex needs, they're exactly what they say, they're complex. And very often they're a whole series of very positive unintended consequences, the accumulation of which is sometimes even more advantageous than the intended consequences. Now, when you are developing an impact model, how do you take into account these unintended consequences that are really beneficial, but they're really not in the plan because you didn't foresee them?
Okay, so you're talking about beneficial unintended consequences, because there's also the possibility to have unintended consequences that are not beneficial, obviously. And I think we are asking applicants to do both. And this is part of the development process of that process of those 6 months where they develop their project is to think very, very clearly about what they are doing, what the intervention is doing, what kind of impact that will have on individuals. Both positive and negative unintended consequences need to be taken into account. How to do that? I think that's the expertise that local commissioners have, that expertise and know much better than me how to account for that. And I think it really depends on individual projects and the cohorts you're trying to help. If you're working with younger people, then that will obviously be quite different from if you're working with an older generation.
When you have quite a lot of people who are commissioners and you have people who are providers, and some of them are new, I mean, some of the commissioners are new, and indeed some of the investors are new as well. Do you provide for them guidance or any training that will help them get off the ground for this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's why we started the cooperation with the Government Outcomes Lab at Oxford University. So they are setting up, or they are actually already running, first of all, surgeries, so phone call surgeries for payment by results contracts and social impact bonds. So in these surgeries, you could discuss anything from, is this the right thing for me? Should I really be doing this? To getting more specific about, okay, how do I engage a social investor? What am I doing here? So this is really the idea of the Government Outcomes Lab, is to offer really bespoke advice. They are also running, and this ties in with Lindsay's question earlier, they're also running workshops on each Life Chances Fund theme, where they are discussing jointly together with commissioners, stakeholders from all kinds of areas, academics, how to develop outcomes-based commissioning and social impact bonds, and how to do that. So they are providing that kind of training, but it's more like it's almost more advice and peer support. We want to encourage people to learn from each other as well. We want to ensure that those successful social impact bonds that are currently up and running, that those commissioners are included in that conversation and they present their case studies to people who are interested in getting this off the ground.
Okay, James has given an example. He says it's an example of an investment agreement in Oldham around housing providers and the NHS and the council. If you've got any link to that, James, that would be very, very...
that would be awesome, yes.
Yeah, that would be useful to have. That would be absolutely awesome, absolutely, yeah. I gather that, this whole project, Nina, in a way, the money coming from government is really, you're hoping it will be a multiplier, aren't you? That other people will be involved, put money in, and the 80 million you estimate, is that right, will turn into something like 400 million pounds of actual resources in the end?
I can't put a number on that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. We're hoping that that the money we are putting in is being multiplied and is being added to by local commissioners. It's basically to explain why it's 20% from the Life Chances Fund, because some people have a question about that. Why is it 20% and is there any flexibility? So we account basically for the benefits to central government from these projects as well. We understand that these local projects might benefit local commissioners, but they also might benefit society as a whole, wider government and the public purse. So 20% kind of accounts for that wider benefit. And yes, there is also some flexibility around that, because you might have a project where you can prove that actually most of the benefits would accrue to central government or savings even. And then we would possibly be able to move the contribution from the Life Chances Fund up a little bit, but that's really project dependent.
Okay, well, finally, as we're getting close to the end, I mean, Lindsay's talking about how we can sort of get the information around more effectively. She's put some links up to things that are happening. And she said that, you know, is there any mileage in you or someone from your department and someone from GUAC like Lindsay visiting housing associations and going through that with them, social landlords? And Abby, do you have any other ideas about how we can involve social landlords and get this information out more widely so they fully understand what it's about?
Yeah, I think we'd be really keen on that. I think it would be really great for us to know if there are any events happening where we might be able to field somebody to speak, either from our team or the Big Lottery Fund, who I explained is quite closely involved in this process. So first of all, you know, let us know if any events are coming up. And then secondly, we also have a mailing list where we share opportunities and information about social impact bonds, the Life Chances Fund, other opportunities related to this issue. So I'll try and post the link. If I find it now, I'll try and post the link to this mailing list in the chat function as well, because I think it will be good for people to be on the mailing list. And then if they have other ideas of how we can involve housing providers, approach us, please, and we'd be really keen to do that.
Okay, and is this a scheme you think will go on in the future? I mean, once this is finished and the first sort of 80 million plus is gone through, is this something that you hope will continue after that, Nina?
Yeah, absolutely. We're just starting. I mean, this is a really new way of doing things, a really new model. And the Life Chances Fund is just one example of a government outcome fund. There are several happening at the moment. I mentioned the Homelessness Fund. There is possibly one around care leavers being developed by the Department for Education. So other government outcomes funds that support the development of social impact bonds are either being initiated or already in progress. And we hope that after the Life Chances Fund, you know, we'll be able to do something else. Or, you know, we might get to a point where commissioners, local commissioners say themselves, hey, that sounds like a good way of focusing on improving outcomes for individuals. Let's look into doing this without the contribution from central government. So we'd be keen on supporting that as well.
Okay, well, that's really great. So we've sort of come to the end now of our hour, of the whole hour that we've done, and it's gone very, very quickly, and you've given a lot of information. So thanks, Nina, for taking part in this and doing that. And I'm glad we got through without too many technical blips. Yeah, I know we could go. So that's great. So thanks a lot for doing that. And I hope all of you enjoyed the webinar. I think we had a lot of information. You will get a recording of this sent to you immediately after it's over. The YouTube version of it will go up on the GUAC website, and I'm sure the slides that Nina will be sending to Lindsay will as well. You also have a lot of information that's come up. People have put links, and all that's really, really useful. And I'm sure GUAC with Nina and her department will work out how we can involve social landlords and housing associations so they know about this scheme more effectively. So I hope you found this webinar really worthwhile. And thank you again, Nina, for doing it. And, you know, we'll close the webinar now and we'll end with the video that we began with. So thank you all for taking part. And I hope to see you again at another GUAC video very soon.